Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to my podcast, Spiritual Talk with Christy Godwin and Friends. Thank you for being here. Now, let me introduce my guests real quick. First, I want to introduce Dee Walter. She's the founder of End of Life Workshop for Everyone Alive. She's guided by a lifelong awareness that death is a transition, not just the end. She helps people prepare both practically and emotionally. And I hate to say it, but after losing her husband and how she navigated that life is when she really got involved on helping others navigate that path. So thank you for being here, Dee.
Thank you, Christy. I'm glad to talk about death.
I know very few people say that. And now I also have Pam O'Connor here. Pam is a licensed massage therapist of nearly 19 years of experience. She is my own personal massage therapist, I have to say. And she is the owner of Joyful Horizons here in Omaha, Nebraska. She specializes in myotherapy, and I used to not know what that was, but if anyone's interested, please look it up. It made the difference between having a really healing massage and then someone just rubbing oil into me. So she is specializes in myotherapy, healing touch, and end of life doula care. She has a lifelong background in healthcare, much of it in nursing homes, so she got to experience a lot of that transition of life up close and personal. Pam's website is joyfulhorizonsomaha.com. Also her you can she told me to do this, people. I have permission to give her phone number. It is 402-305-0910, but the verbiage and how to contact Pam will be on if you look when you open up this podcast, it will be there. So you don't have to remember that number, but we will give it again later. Now, for today, guess what we're talking about, people? We're talking about death and we're trying to demystify it, take the scariness out of it. Death is something that we all share, yet so few people talk about it. I know other cultures do. America, we tend to not do that. In this episode, we're really going to talk about the end of life doula aspect of it, and also Dee talking about how do you navigate the waters before you head into that transition. And then afterwards, how do you navigate some of the emotional components of it? So now, Pam, I want to ask you, what drew you into this work of walking with people and families just on that threshold of that transition time of life and death?
Yeah, I uh, my first experience of um, having someone pass, I was actually a teenager, and I had gotten a summer job working in the local nursing home, and and I have to say that my initial reaction was, well, first of all, it scared the crap out of me, um, but it was only because I didn't understand it and I had never experienced it before. And it was never anything that we talked about in our family. So um, by experiencing that, and then I had other people that worked around me that kind of helped guide me through that a little bit. Um, I feel like that was kind of the door that opened that really intrigued me about making a connection with seniors and people when they're getting into that later year of their journey, that latter part of their journey. I just felt really drawn to it.
Thank you. Yes, yes. It's I know a lot of young ladies and what I've experienced because I have daughters have gone to work in nursing homes, and it's always an eye-opening experience for them
Mhm.
because we tend to hide away our older people as they get to end of life. Now, Dee, I'm gonna ask you the same thing. What drew you to walking this path with people?
From a young age, I was taught about death when my mom and dad were 12 years apart. So I was taught death, you die as soon as you're born. And you take a breath in when you're born and you breathe out when you die. And that was installed in me from real young age. And I was
That's so
taught,
unusual.
and I know, enjoy the life you have per day, every day, as it's going to be your last day. Please need to be prepared and be ready for your loved ones when they're grieving. They don't want to know what to do with you. They don't want to be bothered by what do you even want to be cremated, or do you want a burial? Be sure everything's written out completely ahead of time. And I see that need so much around where I live now. We usually have 4 deaths a month, and it's an average thing, and nobody knows what to do with them. So it's good to have that personal things done before they die.
It's so unusual, especially in our culture, how that they talked about that with you, Dee, because I know Pam didn't sound like she had that conversation. And I
Mm-mm.
actually had a brother who passed with muscular dystrophy. So he was born, I know we're all born dying, but he was really born dying. He was born and had a disease that you could see taking him off this planet every day. And my family still didn't really talk about it. Even though it was there in front of us, we didn't discuss it. We knew it was inevitable, but I really love the way you talked about that, Dee, how, live every day as it is your last one on this planet, because we truly don't know. And that is something I've noticed that a lot of other cultures do differently than us. Now, why do you think, Dee, it is so difficult for people to talk about death? And how does a death cafe, I know that you're a facilitator for that, create a space for these conversations? For people listening, I was so confused about what the death cafe was. I'd never heard about it until Dee got involved. And it is just, it's a safe place to talk about the transitions.
Been with the Death Cafe 2 years now, and the first thing that comes up is you're afraid. Afraid of what? You're afraid of what's happening next. Afraid of pain. Afraid of leaving your stuff behind is number 3.
Hmm.
Afraid of to leave the family and friends is number 4. And I've written out everything we've ever talked about in all the death cafes, and a little while ago it was 100 of them. So if we need ideas, I've got them. But there's answers to many people afraid of death from Death Cafe meetings. They talk about it, and like you say, it's a safe place. They have certain rules that you have to abide by. They can't judge anybody what they say. It's just a flat, this is what I'm thinking. If you hear the word death, it will happen to me soon. No, come on. You can make your stuff ahead of time and get your paperwork done and live freely. The Death Cafe is worldwide. So when you go into Death Cafe and you look for a place to go, be sure it's not in German or another language that you don't understand. But there's a lot of Death Cafes out there to be able to, and it's all different cultures. And like you say, everybody does it different.
That is so true. So they do have, because I looked it up after Dee got involved, and you type in where you are,
Mhm.
and it sends you to locations that are close to you. Reminds me of one time my husband and I were on a vacation in Italy, and he did a great job of scheduling all of these fabulous tours, right? And we walk up to one, and we just start talking to the guy, who's doing the tour. He said, "You're here for the 2 o'clock or whatever it was." We said, "Yes." He said, "It's an Italian." So we had made a mistake and booked one. So that reminds me of that. We just went and did something else because it would have been so useless for us to have been there and him speaking Italian. Now, Pam, I want you to take a little bit different spin on that. How have you experienced avoidance impacting families at the bedside?
Yeah. You know, I guess, I'm so familiar with avoidance because of the family that I grew up in. Um, and I think because people, like Dee said, people are so afraid to talk about it that
Yeah.
there's that fear of, um, that fear of letting go, that fear of what's going to happen when I leave, what's waiting for me out there. Um, so I just tell you, in my experience with my parents, because they did absolutely nothing to prepare. They never talked about anything. I mean, as far as they were concerned, they were going to live forever.
Hmm.
And I knew with quite certainty that that was not going to happen. Um, and so I actually had to force them to talk about it. I had to force them to talk about, do you have a will? Do you have, any legal documents? Do you have a power of attorney for medical care when you can't speak for yourself? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Where do you want to go? I mean, it's all of this information that, because I knew that I was probably going to be stuck solving these problems. And I didn't know what to do, and I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to do what they wished for.
Hmm.
And because I think that's part of the process is is that feeling of comfort, knowing that, well, when I do go, this is they're going to be okay, and oh, this little ring that I had is going to go to this daughter, because I really want her to have this. I mean, it's just, I mean, it's simple, yet they made it complicated, and so it was quite a struggle, but I learned a lot just going through that process. And but the big thing was it's the fear. And I can remember when I brought it up, my dad promptly got up and walked out of the room because he was too afraid to talk about it.
Hmm.
And it was quite a challenge. And so, I just try to encourage people that I hate to say it, but it's going to happen whether we want it to or not.
It's true.
And it's so if you can prepare for the little nitpicky stuff in advance, the paperwork, the legal stuff, all that ridiculous non-fun stuff, it can make the other half of it so much easier, and I know it sounds weird, but almost enjoyable,
Yeah.
where you can sit back and you can accept, um, and kind of find that peace within to say, this, it's all going to be okay, you know.
When I have spirit step up, everyone that's watching this podcast has to be familiar. I'm a psychic medium, so I spend most of my day with transition loved ones, and I love them stepping up. And the memories they have and talk about are the people that were with them at the end, how nice it was to, and they're not talking right at the end, not at that moment of passing, but if they had an illness, the people that weren't afraid to visit them, the people that showed up and like snuck maybe the ice cream in when they weren't supposed to have it, but and then they like those little moments that make them laugh. Really, they enjoy. I know that's crazy, but there's so much sadness around these people because having an illness myself, I was just talking to Dee and Pam. I didn't record what I was talking about because I was complaining really loudly. And so I spent a lot of my time transmuting and processing other people's feelings about my illness, right? So when you can take part of it out, like Pam was talking about, taking part of the paperwork out, part of that hard stuff out, then you're not having to go through some of that hard stuff. You're not having to have those hard conversations because you've already had them. Now you're just getting to enjoy yourself. It was so funny. My grandbaby walked into my office. Pam has been in my office before. She knows there's a floating moon. And it's just floating and spinning and it's not really touching anything. It's actually magnetic brace. So now this was shortly after I was diagnosed with cancer. And it was just so poignant. Like my grandbabies don't know. They don't know what I have or any of that. They just know I don't feel good sometimes. And my grandbaby walked in here. She looked at that and she's like, Nana, I really like that. I said, Oh, honey, yeah, it's really pretty. Papa got that for me. Can I have it when you die? So those are the things you want to be able to laugh at. And so now
Right.
I put a sticky note on it and I was telling all my people, all my family that when I die, that is so you want to be able to laugh about it, like have some joy around that transition time. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's going to happen anyway. Why not have some joy around it, right?
Right.
Now, I know Pam touched on it some. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. So, whenever you are looking at, I want to ask this to Dee first, the end of life. What about estate planning? When should people start estate planning? What are some of the first steps? Like, if someone has no idea, what is the first thing they should do?
They first should find out just exactly if they want to be cremated or if they want to be buried. That's the number one right off the top. Your body is laying in a room. What are we going to do with it? So that's the first thing you do. What funeral home? What location? Do you want to be shipped somewhere else? Do you want to be with a husband? Do you want to be with a plot with family? There's all kinds of things that have to be done first. And that was one of them. Then you get into all the
That's
legal
fair.
and financial and yeah, the legal, the financial, the social security, the banks. That's the next thing. And then the family after that will take care of whatever is left. And my biggest worry for everybody is the computers. Now, if you've got a computer, be sure somebody knows how to get into it to get the information you need.
Passwords are big.
Passwords are huge.
I know everyone says, don't write them down. No, write them suckers down and put
Write
them
them
somewhere.
down and put them in a safe place.
Yeah, write them down. Now, Pam, I know that well, Dee has also experienced it. Now, Dee, was your husband prepared? Did y'all have all that prepared before?
He had everything written down. He must have known that he was dying because it was great. All phone numbers, all people he wanted contacted, all the financial, every password he's ever touched. It was just all right in a row.
And did he already tell you where he wanted his body, what he wanted done with it?
Well, that was a little bit different, but yeah, he had that wherever we were. We're military, so whatever base, but we just happened to be in Illinois and it worked out great.
So then he was put to rest at the base in Illinois.
Right, Jefferson Barracks and well, it's actually Missouri, Jefferson Barracks. And it was really neat. Both boys that we have is in Illinois, one's in Chicago, one's in St. Louis. And the one in Chicago doesn't really care about going to the cemetery because he knows he's not there. And the other one just goes to the cemetery twice a year. So it was, and he lives only like an hour away. So it worked out really
Hmm.
well.
Hmm. So now, Pam, when it came to your family, there was some resistance there. Just what you were saying, to say the least, right? A little bit of resistance.
Right.
So to nail down what your parents wanted, how were you able to prod them along and get them to talk about something they didn't really want to talk about?
Well, probably the big thing for me was because I knew that their health was not good, either one of them. And so my big concern was if something should happen where they need medical care and they go into a hospital and, say if they're in an accident and they're on life support and they can't speak for themselves, they can't say, if my heart stops, please don't resuscitate me, or please resuscitate me, God forbid. But that was something I was really concerned about because of the quality of their health. I wanted them to understand that, and I wanted them to be clear. So I had to really explain it to them in strong terms. If this happens to you and you're on life support and you're probably not ever going to get off of it, do you want, if your heart stops, you want them to restart it for you mechanically? And and when they put some thought into that, they were then they went, no, I don't want them to do that to me. If it's my time to go, I want to go. And I'm like, okay, now that we have that figured out, we need to create a legal document. We need to do that because you can tell them, but it's not going to make any difference if they don't have a legal document in your
Hmm.
file. So I had to really kind of explain that, and then I had to hire an attorney to, and then he gave me advice. Make sure you do power of attorney, medical power of attorney, and for sure a will. So just start with those, and then anything else that they want to add, they can do that. And so I just wanted to say because I have had experience of somebody young passing in my life, I do recommend, please don't wait till you start feeling like, okay, I'm going to be departing probably within the year. I highly recommend to please do these things, even like midlife, 40s, something like that. Go ahead and do that. If you want to change them down the road, you can. But there's no guarantee when we're going to depart.
Right.
So because we don't know that. And then if you go earlier than normal, then you leave these circumstances and these decisions with other people that you left behind. So it's kind of that kindness that you're offering the people in your life, your friends, your family, just to say, if anything happens, I know I don't plan on this right now, but if anything happens, this is what I want to happen. And
Right.
so it's just nice to just stay a step ahead of it,
It's so true, Pam. Can y'all hear that background noise? No? Okay, so if anyone that is listening to the recording can hear the background noise, I don't know, maybe the spirits are visiting us, but there were some weird noises, but Pam and Dee don't seem to be hearing them. So there you go. It's so important. Pam was right. No matter what age you are, if you're young, it can be the simplest of documents. And as you get older, I look at these estate plans as they have to transition and change a little bit throughout your life. I know I have a daughter has grandbabies. Her and my son-in-law were going out of town, and her and I had already had the conversation before that. Like, okay, I need to have some kind of a power to be able to take these kids to the ER, heaven forbid.
Mhm.
And so as she's leaving, I already knew that. And so everyone's in the room and me doing what I do, the first thing I ask her, I mean, everyone looked at me except for my daughter, but the men, my husband and her husband looked at me like, "What are you asking?" I was like, "Okay, Lakin, before you leave, where are y'all's life insurance policies and will? Where is that located?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, it's da 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 da," without even missing a beat. And her husband and my husband were like, "What? Why are you asking something like that?" Because heaven forbid, if something happens, we need to know that information. You're going to be so distraught that your loved one is no longer on planet.
Yep.
You are not going to be able to think through how to go to the bathroom, much less where this silly piece of paper is, where
Right,
she might have put it. So
right.
please, write it down somewhere and let them, and especially if you have children, oh my goodness, that is so important to make sure that you have that taken care of. And I used to do financial planning. And when you're a military spouse and you move around, I reinvented myself all the time, like different jobs in different places. I was a financial planner at one place, and I would see families stop talking to each other over silly teapots or a few $1,000s just because it wasn't written down. And people would say, well, no, said I could have that. No, well, I want it. We have a special memory with it. And so then there'd be this whole thing.
Yeah.
One lady, it was so cute, but it was perfect. She had gone around her house with a sticky note and written people's names on it and was on that stack. Now, do I recommend something a little bit more written down? I do, but you know what? Hey, people knew. Now, Pam, I want to ask a little bit of the human side of it, the emotional side. When you're supporting someone who is close to passing, what are some meaningful tips to support them?
Well, my first and foremost when I go to someone's home or when I go to see a client that is in the end stages is my first and foremost is to make sure that they are as pain-free and comfortable as possible. That's my first and foremost goal. I want them to be comfortable where they can just relax and breathe and where they don't have to worry about, oh, my back is killing me or this is killing me or whatever. You want them to feel as relaxed and good as possibly they can feel. So that's kind of my first step. And then once I get them comfortable, I I do sit down with them. I'll sit next to their bed, and and I find it important. Well, first of all, I try to meet them where they're at. So I don't I'm not concerned about, what's their religion. I'm not concerned about anything like that. What I want to do is I want to touch base with them and just kind of feel like, where are they spiritually? What's important to them, you know? And like I had a client that when I sat down with her and she was in bed and she said, I don't know why it came to me, but I just said, have you been having any dreams lately? And she said, well, yes, as a matter of fact, I have. I keep dreaming my father comes in my dream, which she had lost him when she was like 7. And she said, but he's been appearing in my dreams, and it's like he's just like he's patting me on the head and saying and smiling and saying, it's okay, honey, I'm here. I'm here waiting for you when you're ready. And so just having it and being able to share that, because I think a lot of times people go, oh my gosh, if I tell the kids this, they're going to think I've lost my marbles. And so they're afraid to share some of that information when it comes to spirit. And so, I think she felt like I was somebody that she could tell me anything and I wasn't going to judge her. And so we just talked about things that she wanted to talk about, and I let her carry that. I let I just followed her lead. And so to be a good listener, I think is really, really important, because I think they do have fears, they do have concerns. And one thing she talked about was, I'm really afraid to lay here dying, knowing that my children are standing in the doorway staring at me and feeling sad. So with that information, I invited her kids in, and her grandkids. I invited them to come into the room if they wanted to while I was caring for her. And I encouraged them, if they wanted to participate, in providing even simple little things like rolling her onto her side to give her back some relief, how to prop her with pillows, how to pull her up in bed gently so as not to hurt her or hurt themselves. And it made them feel like they were allowed to participate in this journey. They didn't have to stand back in the corner in the dark feeling afraid.
Yes.
And so by including them and helping them to be able to participate where they felt like they got to play a role in providing comfort for her, that it gave them a connection. And it was I could really see, it's kind of like the fear left their face and they were able to smile and talk to each other and not be afraid to touch her and hold her hand. And so it was it was wonderful experience.
So, for everyone listening, now I'm going to give Pam's phone number a couple of times throughout this podcast, but again, it will be in the verbiage of the podcast that you can look at the bottom. Her number is 402-305-0910. That peace of mind that Pam was just talking about that she offered is just priceless. To be able to have someone help you along that journey. I know. I've experienced my father-in-law was passing, and, this is him. And again, this was years ago before I was involved in any of this. He was the first person I've been around that was passing. I had gone down to Louisiana where he was to help a little bit. We knew he was in his end days. What I was going to do, I had no idea, but there I was. So this man, from the time I had met him, liked to tease me, right? This man is I think he actually died 2 days after this incident I'm about to tell you. So they had him on a feeding tube, right? So they were showing me how to work the feeding tube to give my mother-in-law a rest. So I am so nervous just because there wasn't a Pam there to make me feel better. I just have to tell you, people. I was nervous. I needed a Pam. She was not there. I did not know her. And so and he knew I was nervous. So I'm doing this. It still makes me laugh to this day now. At the time, I wanted to punch him, even though, he was already dying. So I can't remember if I was pulling it out. I was pulling it out and it like stuck or something. Like it was doing what it was supposed to do. And then he goes, "Oh, ow, oh." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, oh Dad, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh." And then he busts out laughing. Even in his dying days, he didn't have lost his personality. He wanted to have fun. He wanted me to be relaxed. He did not like the fact that I was nervous and didn't, that was a side of me he hadn't seen. And did I mention Pam wasn't there, people? Get you a Pam. I could have used a
Sorry.
Pam.
Sorry. All
I
you
could
had
have
to do
used
was call.
I did not know you, or let me tell you, I would have. But to have someone there that is familiar with that situation can put your mind at ease, can make, it be more joyful. That's what Dad wanted. He wanted me to not be nervous. He wanted to giggle with me and laugh again. So get someone who is familiar with these situations and can help you out. So again, Pam's number 402-305-0910. Get you a Pam. Um, Now, Dee, I'm going to ask you because I know you have actually lived this also with someone so very close to you. You were married to your husband. How long were y'all married?
21 years
Yeah, I thought
Oh,
that's a long journey.
and never had a fight.
Yeah. So just for everyone watching, that's very unusual. I've
I
been married to
wish you
my
had been
husband.
my parents. Jeez.
I have been married to my husband 39 years. I love him dearly, but that is not our case. We still have discussions. So Pam, Dee, what was that like at the end to watch someone that you love so dearly pass and really feel powerless? I think that's the worst thing about it, feeling powerless.
Yes, and it is. You kind of learn as you go. In my case, he couldn't talk for 3 months. He had a brain tumor. It's glioblastoma. If anybody's familiar with that, it's a death sentence. It came on quick. We were on vacation. We weren't even in our own place. And he started to drive and he was driving really weird. So I made him pull off. And from that point on, he couldn't talk. He couldn't walk real well. And it just went downhill. We were on the road. So 3 days to get from Florida to Illinois because he couldn't drive real well. And I sleep behind the wheel, so that didn't help. But we didn't get a chance to say anything to each other. Nothing was said at all in 3 months
Wow.
that he was alive. So it was a slow, very slow process. Luckily, he seemed to understand enough by hand motions, but not speech on don't get up, you're going to fall, or you've got to be careful, or you had to guide him. And then he couldn't walk at all. That became a real problem in 2 months. But the biggest fear I had in that whole thing is to keep him out of pain. There's too many
Yep.
people that say, I can't let him go, I can't let it go, and they're laying in pain. And the hospitals want to keep you in pain, or they just want to hook you up to something to kind of make you feel better, but not do anything with the pain. And I was determined that he was not going to be in pain. So I brought in hospice as quick as I could. And
Mhm.
we had trouble doing that because of the area we were at. And I was from out of state. But we finally got everything situated, and then it just was peaceful the rest of the time. And you lay with him and you talk to him, and he loved baseball. So every time the baseball game was on, I'd have it on the TV for him. And he loved classical music, so you can keep him calm that way. Everything was kind of a peaceful death. So I was okay, and he died at 1:30 in the morning, and I had just changed him. So he was real fresh. But I was
So,
always thankful for that.
Dee, what would you say that you would really want families to understand about what their loved one needs in their final days?
Comfort and no pain. And it can be done. I'm in
Mm.
a class right now. It's the good book death. and it's by Suzanne someone. I forget what the name of it is. I'll have to put it out for you. And it tells exactly how to keep people out of pain and a smile on their face when they pass. And it is really true. You've got to be with them. And if they want ice cream in their last days, let them have it. It's just whatever they want, they get.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like you, I think that laughter makes a big difference.
Yeah, so now
Yeah.
everyone, Pam and Dee and I did not discuss any of this before we got on here. And so there has been a common theme already. We talked about keeping, Pam was very adamant, comfort, comfort, comfort. Dee has said the same thing. Now we've made the rounds to laughter. Like they want to have fun, they want to have laughter and that
Yeah.
comfort.
Yeah.
Now, Dee, well, I think I'll ask Pam this question first. Families often feel overwhelmed and, of course, unsure of what to do, as my story that I just told you, even me. Yeah. I was very unsure of what to do and I didn't have a Pam. Get yourselves a Pam. What are some ways to help people prepare both emotionally and practically? People talk about anticipatory grief. So, what are some ways that people can prepare to, I'm not going to say to not have that happen. It's impossible to not have anticipatory grief happen. What can they do to help circumvent that, to process it, to not let it take over their lives?
Well, first of all, just like Dee mentioned, I do encourage them to do hospice. What hospice does and what I do is it's like they work hand in hand. And I, it, it's just, they kind of take care of some of the bigger things, the bigger issues, if there's got to be medication given or something, because they're usually these people are nurses, nurses aides. They make sure that they're clean and comfortable. And when I come in, it's I'm a massage therapist, and I do energy work of healing touch. So a lot of what I do physically is I try to make them as pain-free and comfortable as possible. So that's the first and foremost. And I think if you can accomplish that, the family is going to immediately feel better also, because their struggle is when they're sitting back and they're looking at their loved one, and when they see them like in pain or agony or like struggling to breathe, or something of that sort, they get anxiety, then they have fear and they panic, and it becomes this big family affair of torment. I hate to say that, but that's
It's
kind of
true.
yeah, it is. So, one of the things that I do when I've made connection with, if they want me to come in and care for their loved one, is I will actually take time to sit down with the family members. We'll go into the living room and we sit down, and usually when I come and when their loved one is resting comfortably or something like that, I'll leave the room, invite everybody to come into the living room and say, now here's what I did. And I explain everything that I did in order to help their loved one feel at peace and as pain-free as possible. And just them knowing that there was great love and care taken for their loved one, then they can sit down and they can breathe. And then I'll say, now, do you have any questions for me? Is there anything that I can explain to you to help this be as pleasant of an experience as possible for all of you? Because it's not just the person that's getting ready to pass, it's all of their loved ones, their spouse, their children, their grandchildren, even friends that are part of the family, and so if they can all come together where they become their own support group, they actually they can lean on each other instead of, doing the typical, well, I'm not talking about this. Well, now they all have, it's kind of like you got to give them permission to say, it's okay to talk about it.
Right. Yes.
Okay, and if you're better at talking about it, then maybe you can help those who can't. So it's really, first and foremost within the family. And then, for those who don't have family, like I had an aunt that went through this when her husband passed, and I was there to kind of help him through it. But she had no family, she had no kids, and so I helped guide her like through the funeral home. They had um, groups, they had people that have gone through the same thing, and she kind of became a part of that little group, where she could sit down with other men and women who had lost their spouses, and she kind of she had somebody to talk to about it. So yeah, it's really important to get that where you feel like you're not walking through it by yourself. That's the hard part.
So important. And also want to, Pam was just talking about like so important. She's mentioned it several times. Dee has mentioned it several times for them to be comfortable. And, as I was sitting here talking to Pam, I had forgotten, but it took me back to a moment where my husband's dad was not home yet. He was still in the hospital. They had not sent him home on hospice yet. And I go down the hallway and everyone just turns to me and it's like all this energy on me, like, what's going on? He wasn't comfortable. And so they did not feel empowered. Everyone thinks that, oh, I would say something. I would say something. I would hope you would. But for whatever reason, the family members that were there, and my husband's mother included, she was kind of an old school, didn't feel like comfortable going up against medical professions. You know how that goes. And so I walked in that room and I was just like, oh, heck no, we are not doing this because you could instantly tell that my father-in-law was not okay. And so I had them down there. I had like 4 or 5 people down there. I was just complaining about, and they kept, well, we're giving him as much morphine as we can. Well, it's not working. I don't know what you need to do, but it's not this. And then I actually had one of them ask me, well, what would you like me to do? I am not a medical professional. I do not know what the options are. But what I do know is we are not going to let this man leave this planet like this. So to
Right.
have someone there like a Pam who will encourage you and let you know that there are options, someone to support, because once I gave everyone their permission to advocate for my father-in-law, then they were more comfortable doing it. It was like they didn't realize it was an option to be able to question medical care.
Right. And if I could just say, just because most of my life has been spent working in the medical
Medical,
field,
yes.
and so I I've learned a lot of things along the way that have helped guide me at offering support. And like, just as an example, my uncle who got sick with lymphoma, and my aunt who had no family, and I went to see him, and I could tell he was in a tremendous amount of pain, and they had been giving him morphine tablets under the tongue, which is supposed to dissolve and kind of do its thing, but he was so dehydrated that all it did was create this paste and powder, and it wasn't absorbing into his system.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And she was sitting there crying because she didn't know what to do. And I said, just hang on a second, and I went up to him, and I kind of, and he was groaning. He was having terrible pain. And so I kind of pulled his gown down a little bit, and he still had a port in his chest from when they attempted to do chemo on him.
Right, right, right.
And I thought, gosh, you know what? I wonder if they can use that. And so I went and I hunted the nurse down, and I brought her back in, and I said, now he's got this port. And I said, obviously these morphine tablets are not working. Is there any way that you can tap into that port and then give him some liquid morphine through that? And they were able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so my aunt immediately, she just,
Yes.
you could just see the relief pass over her.
I
Like,
think that's
oh,
the worst thing
oh,
is to watch your loved ones in pain. And that's what everyone
right,
talks to me. If you, once you can get
right,
them calm, then the other people can be calmer.
right.
Now, Dee, I'm going to ask you, what shifts have you seen in people that attend? Because now Dee puts on in-person meetings where she is, and then y'all really go through some of the aspects of transitioning. What's some of the changes you have seen in people once they attend these meetings?
I think the first thing is I can talk about it because you're talking about it. And it's like seeing some kid have this toy and you want this toy. And they all start to, oh, well, I guess it's safe. We can talk about this. And they'll go scurrying in their little villages and their little apartments and they'll say, did you hear? And then did you do this? And I think it relaxes them. I just wish I could do it with everybody because so far it's been a real problem just to get them to even say the word or look at the word death. But that's the biggest thing. And I want to add something to what Pam was
Of
saying.
course,
When
yes.
you go, I worked in hospice for 4 years, 3 years. And the biggest thing that we found out is do not fight with a family member or whoever in the room because they can hear you.
That is
And
true.
none of us has mentioned that yet. So that's something that please don't do because they hear every word you say and it just causes them more grief. So I
Yes.
thought I'd add that onto it too. But yeah,
Yeah,
as for I think a Death Cafe and the Zooms are terrific for getting together and knowing somebody else feels like you do,
Yes.
scared.
So
hmm
I also want
yeah,
to say, like when Dee was just talking, when Pam mentioned, and also when I was talking, even though I was advocating for my husband's dad and I was arguing with the healthcare professionals, I did it outside
Mm.
because I didn't want him to think that he wasn't getting the best care available. I didn't want him to hear that there was a problem.
right.
So, I'm glad you mentioned that, Dee, because I am say, you try to protect their peace as much as possible. And certainly don't, like Dee said, don't argue with other family members around them. They can hear that. Even if you think they're not, I cannot tell you how many times I will
Mhm.
have a spirit and
Right.
they will tell me words to tell my client, and it will be the exact words that client said to them, and they didn't think they could hear the person that was transitioning couldn't hear them. They said, well, they weren't there. They
Yeah,
were in a coma. They can
right.
still hear. Yeah. So still speak words
Yeah,
of kindness and love. And
right,
it is not the time to voice your ills against them.
right.
That is not the time. Now we're gonna have some closing wisdom here. I'm going to start with you, Pam. I'm going to ask both of you this question. If you could leave each of our listeners with one piece of advice for preparing for death, whether it be their own or a loved one, what would it be?
Um, I think probably the biggest thing that I found important, just because I kind of got caught up in that with my parents, um, was is have the legal documentation completed. Have that done, because if you don't, the I mean, that's when you end up with all the fighting amongst family
True.
that is ridiculous and unnecessary. And the thing is that make sure that you have somebody that's kind of controlling, like the government entities like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those sort of things. Because if you don't have that stuff resolved or stay on top of it, because the bottom line, they don't care that you're grieving. They don't care that you just lost a loved one. All they care about is themselves and their corporation, and making sure that they don't have to pay out any more than they absolutely have to. And so it's, if you can avoid that sort of painful stuff, and have that all resolved in the beginning, then it kind of makes that whole process, that we can't avoid. It's going to happen, but at least if we can make it go as smoothly as possible, so that everyone doesn't feel like they're in agony and struggling and what do we do, and it's and you can't even grieve. you,
Hmm.
you can't even feel any emotion because everybody's so busy feeling anger,
Right.
and it's not a good thing. So just yeah, my suggestion would be to take care of the icky stuff first, get that out of the way and just have it resolved the best that you can, and then kind of go with all that emotional, spiritual, love.
So, Dee, I'm going to ask you the same question. If we could leave our listeners with one piece of advice for preparing for death, whether it be their own or someone else's, what would it be?
Well, Pam already said what I have written down, but it's easier too to have your funeral plans already paid for, so there's no extra expenses to someone that's like, oh, now I have to pay for a funeral on top of losing whoever it is. So the insurance of things being paid, the funeral home needs to be paid. Where, like I said before, is it going to be cremation? Is it going to be burial? Where at? The little things that really pile up on that first instant that they go, you don't know how to even start. So
Right.
there's plenty of lists. Well, I have a full list that I sat down with a lawyer with. I think you're going to say something about that here in a
Yes,
minute.
I am. Yeah,
So yeah, I think that the biggest thing though is have the funeral paid for, or at least know where you're going and what you want done. That's so important.
it is. I want to thank you, ladies, for being here. What Dee was referencing is she has two lists. One is if you are have a military affiliation, and the other is if you have spent your life as a civilian. Those are going to be on my website. I see my social media person has been messaging me as we've been recording. So, hopefully she has those on my website, but they will be on my site at the posting of this podcast. So, Christy Godwin, Psychic Medium, and we're going to call them Dee's sheets. So just so y'all are clear, it's going to be Dee's name on there, Dee's sheets, and there's going to be two options for them, one for a military and one not. Also, I want you to, everyone, please visit a death cafe. Let's take the stigma out of it. If you know someone who is transitioning, if you maybe it's you yourself, maybe you're the one who needs the comfort, contact an end of life doula. I'm going to give Pam's number again. It's 402-305-0910. A lot of times you need that calming voice that of reason and to know what the options are. You're in uncharted territory. You don't do other things without having a professional there with you to help you guide you. You you don't have to do this transition of yourself or a loved one without someone there to help you. So get you a Pam. I want to thank you ladies for joining us. Hopefully we can do this again. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you, Christy.
And I want to thank all of you who have joined us today. If you want to contact Pam, her contact information will be here. Now, Dee, you only have in-person meetings right now. I'm trying to get her, just for everyone listening, I'm trying to get her to go, on the webs. I'm trying to get her there. But now, if someone lives in your area, can anyone come to your meetings or only the people that live in your little?
So far, it's just here because it's a closed off community,
Okay.
basically.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Don't worry, people. I'll get Dee on the webs at some point. I'll get her there. All right. Thank everyone for joining me. I hope everyone has a blessed day.
Thank you.